Hey guys, what's up? It is week 298, getting closer to 300. Don't have anything planned for 300, but I probably will have one planned for 312 because that'll be the 6th-year anniversary of the weekly show format. Let's hop right into the reviews. Have a handful for you, some new releases and stuff like that. So this one here is from On Earth Films. This is from 2008, I believe, originally, and this is invitation only. And if not mistaken, when was this? Yeah, this is, I believe, a Chinese film, if I'm not mistaken. So this one was kind of like a film that had kind of like extreme kind of bend to it, and I had heard about it for a long time, and I never actually did get a chance to check it out. So when On Earth was putting it out, I was pretty excited. You know, On Earth releases a lot of wild things, and they had a great last year. They're probably going to have a good year this one too. So yeah, anyways, invitation only. So, you know, Hostel came out like 2005, 2006, and we had like kind of a big boom with that and Saw, where people would call them torture porn, right? Now, that's like a term. It's like, whatever. It's just kind of like a derogatory term towards horror films. It's like, if it's a good film, it's a good film, regardless. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Okay, don't let them label things to automatically hate it. You know what I mean? I understand those movies are for people, certain people. But this is generally kind of in the style of a Hostel or Live Feed by Ryan Nicholson, if you haven't seen that one. So essentially what you have here, this one does kind of have, I guess, a little bit more, I would say, more depth than Live Feed, but I think it's kind of the same kind of message in a lot of ways compared to like Hostel. So we have the ultra rich preying upon the poor. And one day we have this cab driver. He's not a cab driver. He's like a limousine driver, and he's supposed to pick up this rich guy. He is a little late, and basically the millionaire tells him, "Hey, I have this party to go to. I don't want to go. Just take my spot. Go as my cousin. Tell everybody your cousin. You have this certain amount of money to spend." So he goes there, and he's having like kind of a great time. It's a very strange place. And before long, he realizes, you know, he's there for a different reason than to party. He meets a group of other people that are very similar to him, and we learn who they are and why they're there. And pretty soon they're in a fight for their, survival. People are picked off and taken to, places and tortured and mutilated in front of others. There's big piles of nasty, thrown away body parts, limbs, and disembowelments and stuff like that. There's a pretty gnarly kind of face reconstruction here. A couple really nasty throat slits, all that kind of stuff. The practical effects are really solid. Now, I do think there might be some, I can't remember if there's any CGI splatter, They used to be a big hang-up back in the day, like in 2008. You'd be like, oh, why'd they ruin it with CGI? But it is what it is. So I thought the effects were pretty strong, pretty solid. I thought the story was, typical but effective. I mean, in this kind of vein, it's very much in that kind of, torture, thing, but it's not necessarily, it fits more in the Hostel vein because you have the rich people paying the torture people. But this one, it's more personal, and you find the reason why. It's not necessarily just rich people paying for it, it's rich people enjoying it. Definitely, prey upon the poor and everything like that because they want to be something else. And that's just kind of disturbing. But yeah, I mean, the bad guys are decent. I mean, they're masked. There's a couple kind of main ones. Yeah, but anyways, it's a solid movie. I had never seen it. It's definitely a gore flick that I think a lot of people will enjoy for the gore effects, and the story's solid. Like I said, the characters are decent, and you're pulling for them. You never dislike. I really just didn't like any of them. I wanted them all to cover and pull through and make it. As far as the special features are concerned, we have behind the scenes photo galleries and trailers. Now, to my understanding, I don't think this ever had a Blu-ray release. I'm not even sure. It must have had a stateside DVD release, but I never had got a chance to see it. I think I probably do have a copy sitting over here. But yeah, I thought this one was really solid. I enjoyed it. But it is kind of exactly what you expect, nasty gore film from, Asia. But On Earth doesn't really disappoint, especially when they tackle the Asian stuff or the On Earth classics. I always really like what they do, and this one is no exception. I think it's better than Live Feed, which they also put out by Ryan Nicholson. Now, I don't know, I probably prefer Hostel to it, to be honest. Now, I know a lot of people are hot and cold on Hostel. I do enjoy the first Hostel. But yeah, this one is in that vein, so if it sounds like it's up your alley, it does deliver on the goods. So yeah, it's invitation only. Okay, the next one is from Sub Rosa Studios, and this is The Day of Destruction. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is a movie from a couple years ago. It's definitely made during the COVID times. Now, this is a Japanese film, and this is a short. It's only, what's the rank? 72 minutes, but it runs by pretty quick, to be honest. But I'm not really sure. Here's why I call it a COVID film. And I don't mean it's a COVID film that it's made, in isolation with very minimal actors. Although it does have that aspect to a certain point. It's very, allegoric and stuff in the COVID way, and it's very metaphorical, whichever one you want to use. I know they're not the same thing, but sometimes as an idiot myself, I will switch them on accident. So essentially what we have is in the very beginning, everybody's told there's a creature within this cave and whatnot, and this person goes in, it's like snowing. It reminds me of something like, Philosophy of a Knife, how they have all that snow and that cold feeling in the beginning of that movie. So they basically go into this, just like kind of shut down mine or something, and they see this like nasty giant abomination of a creature, and this is, I guess, supposed to be a disease or famine or whatever is going to happen, and we fast forward down the line, and it seems that everybody's suffering from a virus, something that's taking them over, this evil that's driving people crazy. They're starting to lose their humanity. We obviously have this as COVID. There's this virus coming on. It's definitely a direct connection here. And we also incorporate all these other kind of characters and all these other things. And it's very, very strange. It's very hard to grasp exactly what is happening on the storyline, to be honest. You get the gist of it. You get that it's just this big metaphorical COVID thing, and they're making a statement on humanity and isolation and insanity and these kind of things that affect each other and people just being awful to each other. It's kind of what they're making a statement on. But as far as like the storyline is concerned, it's bizarre, it's weird, it's wild. I don't really know how to go about it. It's not exactly the most exciting film. It's not, it's not a bunch of action set pieces or gore set pieces. It's a bizarre one. It's a weird one, and it's mostly, there are some strange scenes where they obviously are walking around Tokyo in outfits and screaming and doing weird things, which are going to garner some attention, but not much because, it's Japan. And I don't know if it's Tokyo exactly, but Japan, a lot of people will not pay attention to that kind of shit like they would in New York City. They'd also kind of be like, oh, whatever the fuck, go away. But yeah, it's kind of interesting in a lot of ways and bizarre. Like I said, it's a hard film to talk about. It's a hard film to kind of review because I'm not necessarily sure exactly. I know what they were going for, but I'm not sure how the story completely unfolds and everything like that. That's The Day of Destruction, not to be confused with what was the one from 1980, which was the big kind of Japanese American co-production, The Day of Resurrection, which is a pretty cool film about a virus as well, kind of the end of the world deal. So I mean, they probably have some similarities there. Has a huge cast if anybody's not seen that film. Okay, this next one is definitely a product of its time, and this is from Arrow Videos, and this is .com for Murder. I know there's a couple movies that have similar titles like Fear.com and Murder.com, but this is .com for Murder, and it's by, I guess this podcast favorite, a podcast or YouTube favorite here. I cover a lot of his movies. Nico Mrparka, who did Island of Death and Zero Boys, and most recently I covered one of his films. What did I cover? Nightmare at Noon. So yeah, I'm glad kind of Arrow's going through his kind of filmography and putting them out on Blu-ray. This is one that I didn't really know about. Nico is a Greek filmmaker. He's a very interesting guy. He's always got really kind of, I don't want to say, he's always got really interesting takes on things, so that's always nice. This one was made in 2002. It's a kind of a techno thriller. You know exactly kind of what you're getting into. It has Natasha Kinski in here. That's Klaus Kinski's daughter. Also has what is the actress's name? I want to make sure I get it right here. Nicolette Sheraton, and she was in, I remember her from Beverly Hills Ninja, but it's also got a couple rock stars in here, and Roger Daltrey from The Who, and Huey, which one is it? Huey Lewis, one of the guys from Huey Lewis, if I'm not mistaken, or is it's just Huey Lewis, yeah, he's in here. I was thinking Hall & Oates, Huey Lewis. I always confuse Huey Lewis in the news and Hall & Oates, okay, sue me, but it's Huey Lewis, so that's kind of nice. So basically what we have here is this Roger Daltrey is kind of like this big tech guy. He's rich, and his wife, Natasha Kinski, gets in an accident, and she's confined to a wheelchair. He sets up the house to have like this big kind of internet kind of deal and high-tech stuff. She starts surfing on the internet. She kind of stumbles and starts chatting with this supposed killer, and this killer kind of starts to manipulate the situation and attack people she knows, and eventually he's going to set the sights on her. So it's kind of ahead of its time in an aspect. You don't think like Strangeland from 1998 kind of incorporated the internet and picking people up and murder in that aspect, but what this one does, which I thought was unique, it kind of does like the webcam or like the kind of grainy weird video footage that you'd send online, and I think that's kind of like hit a creepy nostalgic point for a lot of people. I think it's a good time to release this because like a lot of the creepypastas like lost like digital footage and stuff like that, and there's a whole slew of movies that had this kind of like low tech, like high, at the time it was state of the art internet, but it was kind of low tech nowadays, and you look at it and the footage is grainy, and it's kind of like similar to a snuff film. Like how you have the old snuff films, like, or even like 2001, and you have the digital stuff that looks like, August Underground and things like that. So the snuff kind of looks kind of in that vein, and he's sending it online. So that's kind of like right on the beat, right on the pulse, right away. It was kind of hit when the iron's hot. I mean, for the most part, it's decent. I mean, it's an okay film. Huey Lewis is better than expected in here. Takashi Kinski's okay. And it has decent set pieces. It's got good production design and stuff like that for the most part. There's nothing really terrible about it. I mean, it's very much a product of its time. It's a techno thriller kind of horror film from 2002 that incorporates technology. So it's dated, but it's dated in a unique kind of interesting way that kind of opens your eyes. As far as this, I mean, as like how far we've come in technology and how like it compares to like the fake snuff films at the time and how people are kind of hyper focused on like creepy lost like video files and shit like this. So essentially, as far as the special features are concerned, we have the making of .com Murder, featurette on making the film, .com for Murder, The Unknown Story, new featurette, writer-producer Nico Makarakis revisits production, audio, archival interviews with Roger Daltrey and Huey Lewis. What's really good about the Nico docs is like a lot of them are the old ones, but he'll make new stuff for it. And he starts going on this like kind of tirade. You think it's a tirade at first, how people were voting down .com for Murder on Internet Movie Database, and you're like, well, what's he talking about? Is it just like poor reviews that upset him? And then he starts talking about how basically you can pay for ratings on Internet Movie Database to like dog a movie if you're upset with it. And he goes through this whole thing. He basically proves that obviously people have been doing this to .com for Murder and they kind of shot it down. That's why it's got such poor reviews. And then he was just kind of has opened up this weird kind of conspiracy that people are hating on this movie, and it's not that bad. It's not a horrible film at all. It's very much a product of its time, and it's pretty solid for its time. It's like I said, .com for Murder. I would recommend it if you like these kind of movies, or if you're big into like the technology horror films that reflect their time. I mean, you have the ones in the 90s like Brain Scan and Lawnmower Man, and it's just so weird. Virtuosity. There's a lot of these kind of movies like this, but we start getting in this time frame, they do have a similarity as well. Internet horror, I guess you'd call it, which is bizarre. Very popular now today. I think that there's always going to be internet horror now. Okay, the next one up is from MVD Rewind, and this is Men at Work. Directed by Emilio Estevez, starring Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen, Keith David, a couple other familiar character actors here and there. Now this one is late 80s if I'm not mistaken. I believe it has to be. 1990. Now I saw this movie years ago when I was a kid. It was always on TV. And I remember just the Garbage Man duo. When I was a kid, I always loved Emilio Estevez, and he was just like kind of a highlight, somebody that me and my brother would always rent because Young Guns and Maximum Overdrive. He was just seen Mighty Ducks. He seemed to be everywhere. So of course I was gonna see Men at Work when it was on television. Always watch it. He's with his real life brother Charlie Sheen, of course. Their father being Martin Sheen, their uncle being Joe Estevez. Family of actors here. So basically what happens is these guys are kind of like loner, like loser garbage men with big dreams. Basically Emilio Estevez is a big time surfer. Charlie Sheen is also kind of like a ladies man. They're both kind of like sleep around a lot, whatnot, of course. But it's weird because in the very beginning in this movie, it's like early 90s, right? And he's a peeping Tom. Charlie Sheen's always like watching, and very much a Rear Window kind of style story here. He's always watching his neighbor and watching what she does, infatuated with her. And you kind of see a glimpse of the whole little apartment. You kind of, like I said, very Rear Window. Not as effective or as good as Rear Window, but what really is. So essentially, one day, him and Emilio Estevez basically witness this beating of a woman by this senator, or he's basically a congressman or something. He's gonna run for senator, and we find out that this guy is in bed with this corrupt guy who runs this like factory that's been dumping toxic waste in the water, and he's gonna turn him in and all this kind of stuff like that. But before he can, he is murdered promptly, and this kind of basically has Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen find his body in the garbage, and they think they're responsible because they did something foolish, so they're worried about it. They're trying to clear their name, and while on top of this, they have like somebody watching over them because they get so much in trouble. Because Sly Richardson, their chief or their boss, basically, it feels very much like a buddy cop movie, to be honest. He basically had sent his like brother-in-law to watch them, who's an ex-Vietnam vet, and Keith David. And Keith David is absolutely ridiculous and very funny in this. Says some lines that probably wouldn't fly nowadays, some things that probably wouldn't fly nowadays, but essentially it's just these three, basically the two and then the mismatched Keith David kind of doing a comedy of errors while the bad guys run around in stupidity. This movie's all about like pairs and duos and crews traveling, because we have the initial hitmen that are hired by the main bad. Then we have another pair of garbage men that are always out to get Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen. They're always back and forth doing pranks on each other. Very much like a Bad Boys situation or a Running Scared situation with Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal. So, like that other duo of guys who would have their own movie that are basically just these guys that are competing with them. So we have those guys running around. Then on top of that, we have Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen that separate. So then we have like Charlie Sheen running around with the love interest. And then we have Emilio Estevez running around with Keith David. And then we have these pair of cops that are really goofy and dumb that do not like these garbage men. So it's just like this comedy of errors of all these people running into each other and getting in accidents and all sorts of nonsense. It's very much a product of the late 80s, early 90s where we have like these comedies that turn into action films. And there is stakes, people get messed up, but it's not. This one is not too extreme in a lot of ways, but I kind of miss these buddy cop kind of action films, like Rush Hour and Bad Boys 2 and 3 were there in that same vein, but and Beverly Hills Cop, all these kind of movies like this, right? What was the one with Damon Wayans that I watched? Mo Money, all these kind of movies like this that had like this very bulletproof, there's hundreds of them, and it is a genre that still continues to go. I guess The Nice Guys would be one, but I always enjoyed them, which, speaking of Nice Guys, both had Keith David in it as well as this one, so it's like Keith David steals the show for me. He's got a lot of funny lines. He's got a lot of ridiculousness. He's over the top. I'm sure it would be insensitive now to portray a Vietnam vet this unhinged and whatnot. But yeah, the one unfortunate thing is the surround sound's good. The picture looks good. All that stuff. But there's no special features. I don't know why. I'm not sure if this had a previous Blu-ray release. There's no features on the disc. No commentary, no interviews. I'm sure everybody just didn't want to talk about it or whatnot. But regardless, it's a decent, solid release from MBD Rewind. It's a cool, fun movie. Very much a product of its time, and I do miss movies like this, and I remember watching these all the time. Very enjoyable, very good stuff. Okay, the next one is from Mondo Macabro. This is from 1971, and this is Don't Deliver Us from Evil. And they initially had this on DVD, so this is an upgrade for them, which I love seeing. And this movie is one that I don't think I had ever seen. Well, I would have remembered it. This is a French film, if I'm not mistaken, and usually, like, you think, like, nunsploitation, right? You see the cover, you think like this, the girls are in a convent, and it is kind of, I wouldn't really necessarily call it nunsploitation, but I immediately thought it was going to be that. And I was like, there's not that many nunsploitation movies from France, or there is exploitation movies from France, but to be honest, most of them, if they're not Jean Roland, or I wouldn't even call them exploitation, more arts, or certain directors, they kind of like, I tune out. I'm not gonna lie. There's a couple that are just directors that make exploitation movies in France around this time. They're just unbearable to me. But there are some really great ones as well, like Brigade of Death. But so this one, Don't Deliver Us from Evil. So I was listening to the commentary. There's a commentary by Kat Ellinger, and there's also some other features on here. And it's kind of opened my eyes on this one. Now, I did enjoy it. It's a really dark, really serious, really beautifully well-shot film. And there's a special feature on here. Let me make sure. Basically, interview with writer-critic Paul Buck. And that interested me because he directly compares that this movie was inspired by the same story that inspired the Peter Jackson film Heavenly Creatures. And that makes a lot of sense because the plot of this film is basically following two young girls who, one's from a more privileged home, and they're going to this convent over the summer, and they create this infatuation with each other. They're like reading fantasy books, but they seem to have like, I don't even want to go here, this sexual tension amongst each other, and one starts to kind of manipulate the other one a little bit more, I think, has a darker side, and they start to do these awful dark things. They worship Satan, and at first you're thinking this could be this weird playful kind of just like typical kid, going against the grain stuff here. But as it progresses, it gets much, much darker, where they actually start to, like, hurt other people and hurt animals. And at the very end of this movie, I think there's like 2 or 3 scenes in this movie that I don't think anyone really would forget. Like I said, it's gorgeously shot. It's well acted. It's really uncomfortable in a lot of aspects because we have these people that are portrayed as young girls and they're naked and they're very sexual. And it's just, and like it's sexual in a lot of bad ways because there's a lot of men here that are trying to take advantage of them in these gross ways. And almost every guy in the movie, Kat Ellinger points out, is just a moron and stupid. And these girls are the most intelligent things in the film. And you think about it, yes, and they have a huge imagination, and they just don't really belong here. They don't belong surrounded by the people they're surrounded by. They don't really have the outlet to carry out what they want to do, and then the suppression of the religion, all this kind of shit. So it's an interesting film, and it has a lot of the same themes that a lot of these other ones have. But really, to me, it feels more like a Spanish or an Italian, exploitation or horror film. And I don't even want to not call this exploitation, because although it has these elements, it feels, smart, and has obviously not that an exploitation movie can't be smart and have like super much like a bunch of integrity. I feel like exploitation movies, in general, people think that just by the title that they're just not going to have that stuff, but they always do for the most part. So it has a lot of depth in here, and the ending, I said, is amazing. Like, the ending is just like, holy shit. Yeah, just a beautiful looking movie, a really kind of a hard watch, to be honest. Like, not in the aspect, it's not the easiest film to watch. It doesn't, like, it's a very slice of life. It's long. It's like 100 minutes, but I don't mean it by like a bad movie. It's like boring or something like that. I mean, it's got some difficult subject matter, and it's very, just like following their lives for a certain point in time. But you see like how their parents treat them, and just how they do the psychological aspects of the girls, especially the one from the richer family who's like petting the kitten, and then with the birds, and what happens with the second bird. It's really bothersome. So if you have any worries about animal cruelty, I would skip this one due to the birds and everything like that. But yeah, it's a really good film. It looks great. It sounds great. It's a gorgeous film. According to this, it was never released on theatrically in the United States, and the first Blu-ray release is remastered from the film's original negatives, which is very cool. So we have an interview with the director Joel Séria, archival interview with the director as well, archival interview with actress Janine Gupel, and then interview with writer-critic Paul Buck. And we also have an audio commentary by Kat Ellinger, which is much appreciated. This is right up her alley as far as the stuff she talks about. She does a very good job of breaking this one down. And this is an excellent film. Like I said, 71 also, you saw stuff like The Devil's coming out, and I believe Let's Scare Jessica to Death. So it's some really good films, interesting films too. So yeah, this is good stuff. Don't Deliver Us from Evil. I would recommend checking it out for sure from Onda Macabro. Okay, the next one is from Well Go USA, and this is an Indonesian film, if I'm not mistaken. Lately, a lot of Indonesian films have been making it over to the United States. Stuff like Satan Slaves, the remake sequel deal, Impedagor or Impetigo, however you want to say, Impedagor, I think is how you say it, and some other ones as well. What is it? There's been a slew of them. A lot of stuff by Joe Antoir. So this is Death Knot. And I had not heard much about it, except that it looked interesting enough. I guess it technically counts as 2023 for this year. So basically, this feels kind of very similar to a lot of the other Indonesian films I've watched as far as the plot is concerned. We have, this family called back to... It's very much standard in a lot of these kind of horror films in general. I wouldn't even call it an Indonesian trope. So essentially, the mother dies. She still lives at this like small little village, and the brother and sister and a brother-in-law got to go back, take care of put everything together. There's an uncle waiting for them. They go to this house. It's a small, isolated, rural village that's very superstitious, very typical, you know what I mean? And what happens is they learn that their mother was possibly a shaman, and she left a lot of bad juju, and she committed suicide. So there's a lot of strange things going on, and that's where the title comes from. Death Knot, of course. The knot you tie to hang yourself, but it's more than that as well. So find out there's a strange curse on this family. We've seen this kind of stuff before in a lot of these movies, so I would say it's fairly standard. There's some kind of creepy imagery, of course, when people are possessed by this kind of god. There's a weird smile and dance and everything like that. The movie is a little slow-paced, and it probably only feels slow-paced in general because it's a plot that we've all seen before, you know what I mean? What was the one? It's not Satan's Slaves. I know I'm mixing up one of them. Oh, geez, I can't think of the title. It's not in Pitagor, which also has that, right, where they go to the small, like, isolated rural village and they have problems. But it was last year. Queen of Black Magic, the remake of that, also had a lot of similarities to this, right? So, like I said, all these movies have so many similarities, and it's always the kind of typical plot, loss of family member, and weird shit starts happening. We realize the family has a curse, and they have to solve it. This one goes in some really dark places. Those Indonesian movies never pull back their punches. They never are worried to kill anyone, and that's the same here. The ending is pretty dark, pretty cool, actually. Some unique stuff going on. And I did like most of the characters. They were solid. Didn't dislike anyone. Didn't think any of the acting was tremendously poor. But it feels very standard from what I've seen in the handful of Indonesian films I've seen. It fits right in that with the same plot. I mean, I could probably take a bunch of little aspects of all of them and make this movie. but that's not necessarily a negative. It's in a nice location. It's well done. It's well acted. There's no real negativity about the movie. I've seen a lot of negative reviews on Letterboxd, and I just don't really understand. Maybe it's just because it feels, standard for an Indonesian horror film, but doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's a very solid film. It's very, generally has some creepy moments and a decent story, but it's nothing that we haven't seen before. But that doesn't mean it's not, it's bottom of the barrel or anything. It's a decent movie. Okay, here we go. So we're covering these on the 22 shots of moods and horror. And the first one up is going to be the 1979 TV movie Salem's Lot, directed by Tobe Hooper, with an amazing cast in here. You got James Mason, Reggie Nalder, Jeffrey Lewis, who else pops in here? Kenneth McMillan, George Dezunka, I never say his name right, from Deer Hunter. I know there's a slew of other people in here too. Fred Willard. I know I'm forgetting some. Let me look on the back here. David Soul. There we got, who else is in here? Bonnie Bedelia. So many familiar faces and familiar, people in here. So Salem's fucking Lot. This is the biggest blind spot I have in my Stephen King filmography. I've never saw Salem's Lot. I do not know why. It's my biggest blind spot in my Tobe Hooper filmography. And it's probably my biggest blind spot in my Kenneth McMillan filmography, right? Whatever. It's a movie that I should have saw years ago. I do not know why I put it off. I love Stephen King's work, a lot of it, and I like a lot of Tobe Hooper's work, so it just should have been there. So essentially, the story of Salem's Lot is that a writer shows up to do a book on this house, the Marsden house, which he had a run-in with. He was a kid, he's returning, and it haunted the shit out of him. So he comes back here, and pretty much right away he realizes this town is not right. There's something off about it. There's a new antique dealer that just moved in. Kind of a Stephen King trope when we think Needful Things, right? There's an antique dealer in that, but he's not who he says he is. Now, either is James Mason in this antique dealer. James Mason is the antique dealer, and he keeps talking about his business partner, Barlow. Barlow will be here soon, and then you guys will meet him, and you'll love this place. Yada, yada, keeps going on and on and on. And you kind of learn that this town has a haunted past, that the house, the Marsden house, has always harbored evil men in it, and he comes to the conclusion that, the house, it was evil, and it brings evil men. So we have that idea there too, right? Which is The Shining. The Overlook Hotel is kind of similar to that too. So it's another Stephen King little trope here. It takes place in Maine, very New England kind of territory, small town territory. I love the cast in here. Everybody's so good. Kenneth McMillan to me steals the show. He plays the constable. He is absolutely amazing in this. The way he starts to grill James Mason, Starker, and the way he grills David Soul. He's just really good in this. He's such a good character actor. This movie's character actor heaven, to be honest. Everybody's so good in it, and they let a lot of things play. They get a lot of details about the characters of the town, so you know who everybody is. And the vampires look so damn creepy. Reggie Nalder from Bird with the Crystal Plumage and Mark of the Devil is in here, and he plays Barlow, and he's a Nosferatu style vampire. They don't show him right away. They wait an hour and a half for the 3-hour runtime, or 2 hours to show him, which is unique, as the iconic imagery of the kids floating out the window that are terrifying. The eyes of the vampires are scary as shit. Now here, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a scene towards the end of the film where they're in the Marsden house, and the back of the door's open, and we see it, but our character who's in peril doesn't, and there's the vampires crawling towards him, and you see Jeffrey Lewis is turned, and it's scary as shit. It's a really great shot. Also, I noticed how influential this was to Fright Night, which I love Fright Night, but Fright Night's essentially Rear Window with just a great cast and dialogue, but literally they steal a scene verbatim. I mean, but then again, I'm sure they probably lifted the scene from a Hammer movie or something that I forgot I watched. But the scene with James Mason going down the stairs is literally lifted in Fright Night. Now, Fright Night's more 80s, so it has the gooier effects by Steve Johnson, but it's the same fucking scene. I forgot to mention that Ed Flanders is in here too. He's also excellent. Like I said, the cast is great. The characters are great. You like all of them. You really feel like this town is lived in. I really like this movie. I was very happy with it. It was a huge blind spot. On Letterboxd, I listed it as thriller mystery. It's bro, this is a horror film through and through. This is some very horrifying, imagery in here that scarred kids forever. But I love the idea of the whole town being turned to vampires slowly, that evil creeping in, and you go to look for other people and you realize that you may be the only one in town. Reminds me of something creepy like Messiah of Evil, or even, later, like that movie Children of the Night from 1991, the Fangoria one. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, it has that kind of aspect too. That's very Salem's Lot. But yeah, this movie is great. I enjoyed it. For a TV movie, it has high production. Everything's great about it. It's just really professionally well done and everything, and well directed. One of the Tobe Hooper's best movies for sure. Check out Salem's Lot. Great stuff. Okay, so what is 1979 Salem's Lot without 1987 Return to Salem's Lot? That's right. This is the sequel to Salem's Lot, directed by Larry fucking Cohen. How weird is that? Now, originally Larry Cohen's name was in the hat to direct the original Salem's Lot. It's a good thing they probably didn't go with Larry Cohen for that one, because Tobe Hooper did an excellent job. So Larry Cohen making a sequel to Salem's Lot like 8 years later. It's so fucking weird. It's so bizarre. And the long line of like sequels that don't feel like the originals at all. 28 Weeks Later, Return of the Living Dead Part 2, Chud 2, all these movies that, as my friend Dave Z would say, jump the shark. This one right here, it definitely jumping the shark. It's not even jumping the shark. The shark's not even in its viewpoint after a while. This thing's jumping the moon. What was the term? I forgot how the jump the shark term actually came to be. I'm completely forgetting. What was the movie that actually gave the jump the shark moment? I remember it was explained to me once, and I'm completely not using it properly. Anyways, so Return to Salem's Lot. Now, saying all that, do I hate Return to Salem's Lot? No. But the first 15 minutes in, I was like, what the fuck is this? What is this? I was like, this is supposed to be a comedy, right? This is a comedy, right? It's Larry Cohen. It's got to be. I looked up. Yes, it's a comedy. Thank you. I'm like, all right. That kind of eases out a bit. But then I'm starting to think, I'm like, this feels a lot like Chud 2 or Sundown Vampire in Retreat. That kind of style, that weirdness. Now, Michael Moriarty's in here, the Larry Cohen regular. He's in stuff like The Stuff and Q and It's Alive 3. He's in a bunch of other movies too. Very quintessential New York actor. Always wears a hairpiece in Larry Cohen's movies. Really good actor. Really just one of a kind. Now, Jeremy commented he sounds a lot like Christopher Walken, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But they're both from New York kind of actors. But he's a one-of-a-kind kind of strange actor, just a bizarre actor. And my understanding is he used to like to do his didn't by himself. He didn't want a partner. Like, he'd just say his lines to and whatever. So then also Sam Fuller's in here. That's right, Sam fucking Fuller, the director of stuff like The Big Red One and Shock Corner. So it's just like, what the hell is going on? Sam Fuller is an actor in here, and he steals the show. I mean, he's not as good as Michael Moriarty. He's not an actor, but he's very funny, and he shows up to Salem's Lot, and he's a Nazi hunter. He's looking for he's looking for a Nazi who apparently has been turned to a vampire. So Michael Moriarty shows up because he inherited a house. Hey, remember that trope? We just heard Death Knot, all those kind of movies, right? Why else would you go to the middle of nowhere? Michael Moriarty is kind of like a shock photographer, shock like journalist. He goes places and films really crazy shit that would be in a Tales from the Crypt episode or something like that. Like, they always have those weird rituals in Tales from the Crypt episodes, and somebody gets cursed. It's every other Tales from the Crypt episode. So that's basically what he does. He films these weird kind of crazy things. He gets pulled off assignment because his son is in deep shit. He's supposed to take his son somewhere and take care of him before he goes to a psychological, basically, an insane asylum or some sort of medical hospital for his problems. The kid's got a potty mouth. He's never been in another movie before or after this. He basically decides, Michael Moriarty says, hey, my Aunt Claire is not really my aunt. She gave me this house years ago in Salem's Lot or Salem's Lot. Let's go there. They go there. The place is a crap hole, but the town's really weird. The cops in here, played by James Dixon, another Larry Cohen regular, and Hal Holbrook's son, David Holbrook, who if you guys know, he's in Girls Night Out. Yeah. So basically, there are a couple cops, and there's an evil judge there. And it turns out that they want Michael Moriarty to write the Vampire Bible. So a lot of weird, zany stuff happens in the beginning. There's people getting attacked. There's a rubbery vampire that looks really fucking silly. Can't believe this movie played in theaters for a short period of time. It does not feel like a theatrical movie. It's kind of bonkers. Imagine seeing this in the theater, right? In 1987. So basically, there's a lot of downtime, a lot of talking while they seduce him and the boy, and there's a love interest. And at the very end, it kind of goes balls to the wall where Sam Fuller shows up, and they're going to do some vampire hunting. They're going to do some, what the fuck is the guy's name from I Am Legend, right? right? The Matheson story. Neville is the bad guy. What Cortman's the bad guy. Ben Neville, whatever the fuck his name is. Basically, you go house to house and look for vampires. They start doing all this kind of shit. It's a really zany, weird movie full of bizarre characters that don't. It's a weird movie. It's entertaining. Sam Fuller's funny. There's some decent effects at the end. But for the most part, it's just a bizarre weird. It's too weird and too goofy for me to dislike. But I can't give this like a wholehearted, this is a great follow-up to Salem's Lot. I mean, if you're really precious about Salem's Lot and you really love the first one, I do, but I don't have like a connection to it. I just was like, that's a great movie. So I pop in part 2. I'm just like, what the fuck is this? Like, I love Chud 2. I don't care. Like, I know that Chud 2 is nothing like Chud 1. I love Return of the Living 2. I know it's not as good as 1. It's completely jumping the shark. I like it. So how can I sit there just because this is a first time watching and be like, oh, this movie sucks? It's really bad in some aspects, but it's really entertaining in some other aspects. It's Return to Salem's Lot. The Scream Factory Blu-ray has no special features. What a shame. I'd love to hear somebody talk about this fucking weird ass movie. But yeah, it's goofy. It's weird. Enjoy it or don't. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, the next one up is the Patreon pick, and I think this is Chris Carroll picked this one, and it is Liverleaf. Now Liverleaf, boy, oh boy, what year was this? Like 2016. This is a Japanese film. And this is a rough movie, and I mean that in a positive way. It's a movie about bullying, but it's got so much more aspects and so much more layers to it. And this is a movie I think that a lot of people would watch and be kind of bothered by it, right? Because it doesn't really just tackle bullying like straight on. It has a lot of different like elements to it, and it's basically hereditary in a lot of ways that people learn from their home lives, and this small town is just kind of really cantankerous and everything like that. So Sissy has some of these elements too, besides the social media aspect. Take that out, but just like maybe the people who are bullied are like whatever, it has this different layer to it, to be honest. So essentially what we have here is, I can't think of the main character's name, terrible with names in this one. So this girl has moved from Tokyo to this small rural town because of her father's work, and she's bullied horribly by the classmates, and it's a very small class. She says basically there's 10 kids here, they all grew up together, I'm the outsider. But essentially what it is about, 7 or 8 kids are kind of generally focused on her, and there's a ringleader that's quiet, but basically everybody does these awful things to get her attention. It reminds me of something like Heather's in a way, but more serious. So like all the boys and girls just treat her so terribly to kind of like get gratification or some recognition from her, from this girl. So basically what happens is they do all these awful things to her. They beat her up in a pit and like throw her stuff down there, and before long they do something unspeakable that there's no turning back, and this movie turns into a crazy revenge film, a very violent slasher revenge film where kids are killed. And it doesn't stop there. It's basically, you know how that goes. If you plan on getting revenge, dig yourself a grave too. And that's exactly what's going to happen here, because a lot of the people that are helping, or a lot of the people that are around, are not who they seem. It's not everybody's motives are the same. Not everybody did the things they did for a reason, and it becomes this complex thing, this tragedy almost. It's like Shakespearean tragedy. It's pretty stylized in the way the violence and fights are done. It's gory. I enjoyed it. I thought it was beautiful in the snow. I thought it was poetic in a lot of ways. I love this movie. Liverleaf was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I think that maybe run a little long for some people, but I thought it was great. I thought it was tremendous. I liked all the characters. I thought it was really sad and beautiful and just tragic. So I would really recommend checking out Liverleaf. If you like revenge films, or you like Japanese kind of violent films, it kind of fits both those, or poetic ones. I think it's all that. It's Liverleaf. I would recommend checking it out. Really, really high recommend. Great stuff. So yeah. All right, let's get in these questions, comments, concerns, all that stuff. Movie Junkie reviews. I enjoyed those bug movies. Managed to get They Nest last year in a DVD set. It was decent. It's pretty decent. What the flick? I love Tombstone, but the scene where Kurt Russell starts screaming, "No!" I laugh out loud every time. Thank you for another video. Me and my cousin used to do that sometimes. Be like, "No!" And then we'd be like, Curly Bill, "Son of a bitch, no!" That part is insane. So Travis Linscomb, what the 4K rant? Your reaction was great. And no disrespect to Peter. I know, like I said, we all got to vent sometimes. Shit gets so insane, but at the same time, it was just like out of nowhere. It's like, Nick Moore, I'll have to check Tombstone out. It would seem. I think it's been out on Blu-ray for a good while. Yes, it has. And it's not the director's cut though, which adds 2 more scenes in there that aren't in the theatrical. But that's okay. The top 25 had nice surprises. I'll be checking some of them out too. But where and when will I find the time? Exactly. Questions. As Halloween features an unkillable boogeyman, did the neighborhood where you grew up have a real-life boogeyman that became legendary? Not really. You know, it didn't really. I'm trying to think. I mean, there was always like common, like kind of like guys you didn't walk in their yard or whatnot, or people you thought was strange, but I wouldn't say a real-life boogeyman. Do you have a list of 25 or less films that you'd never watch again or should be blasted into space? I mean, I don't have a list on me. I don't make lists like that typically. I try not to be too negative. I don't think any movie should be blasted into space. There's probably at least 25 movies I don't ever need to watch again. I mean, look at any of the retro years I do. Go to the movies that I rated the lowest, like Mama Dracula or some shit from 1980. I'm never watching that again, ever. 3. Which home media company would you like to work for if given the choice? Vinegar Syndrome all day. I know a couple of people that work there, and I like them. They're very nice. I like what they do. They get a lot of the movies I enjoy, so we'll go Vinegar Syndrome. They do a great job. I'd like to be a part of it, of course. Till next week, enjoy the cold, because it means you can curl up and watch movies. Yep. Ken Coakley, another part of Tombstone I forgot to mention last week was when Wyatt spares Ike Clanton's life. He says, you tell him I'm coming and hell's coming with me, you hear? He's coming with me. Hell's coming with me. Then it cuts to them riding out of the sunset to start one of my favorite montages. Yeah, I love that whole line. It's like, hey, where's Matt? What's Stigwell say? Frank Stillwell. He says, where's Wyatt? Right behind you, Stillwell. And he shoots him. I love that part. And he's like, you see that? United States Marshal. My favorite line is, I see a red sash, I kill the man wearing it. That's such a good fucking moment. Back in 2004, my beloved Red Sox were headed to New York to face the Yankees, and one of the Red Sox players, who was a Texan and a fan of Tombstone, said, tell the people of New York we're coming and hell's coming with us. It's great. I also should mention I love Robert Mitchum's narration in the beginning. It's so, and the end it's lovely. He was obviously supposed to play Old Man Clanton in that movie and fell off the horse the first day of filming, fucked himself up, so they gave a lot of his lines to Curly Bill, Powers Booth. When it comes to Michael Rooker, it's hard to find someone with more impressive body of work. I met him twice at conventions. He had stories about Cliffhanger, Days of Thunder, Sea of Love, and others. I also met Michael Biehn twice, as well as Billy Zane. I would love to see Val Kilmer at a show. Yeah, I mean, Michael Biehn is so great in that. He's like got that weird suicidal presence about him. He's like, and hell, follow with him. When he does that the whole thing was great. Hey, Johnny, what that Mexican mean? A sick horse gonna come get us? According to Revelations, the Bible, behold the pale horse. Man assigned upon him was death, and hell falls with him. I could do Tombstone all day. It's I told you, it's like one of my favorites. And Ken Coakley also, you were right about John Houseman being a ghost story. He also won a Best Supporting Actor in 1973 for playing the antagonist professor at Harvard Law School in The Paper Chase, which was filmed on location in Cambridge, Massachusetts, my birthplace. I saw the movie when it first came out because of all the hype around the film, as Houseman was all over Boston TV at the time. He also, like Richard France, worked with Richard France is in Dawn of the Dead and the Crazies. Worked with Orson Welles throughout the 1930s and was part of the famous Panic broadcast of War of the Worlds, a radio show that caused mass hysteria and caused some people to die from fright. It was an audio version of a found footage film. New York police raided the studio and handcuffed Welles. Houseman became Welles' moral support as Welles had to apologize for the panic. I saw a video clip of Welles making the apology, and terror in his eyes was very real. He was on the verge of being prosecuted and having his career destroyed. The broadcast can be heard on YouTube, and it sounded real. The broadcast was October 30th, 1938, and Houseman died October 31st, 1988, 50 years and a day after the broadcast. Houseman was also married to Zita Johann from 1932 film The Mummy, a classic. Another bit of trivia is that Orson Welles wanted to do a film noir of Batman starring Gregory Peck as Batman. Now that sounds really interesting. So basically, I'm just going to do the Patreon drawing and the update right here because I don't really have that much for you guys, to be honest. It's kind of a very small update here. But here we go. It was on sale, and I'm not too familiar with this series, but for the price, it was like $12. I picked up Cowboy Bebop, the complete series. Now, I don't know much about the show, to be honest, but I was like, for the price, I can't really pass this up. I had heard good things about it, but hey, it's Cowboy Bebop, and the total runtime it's not super long. It's not, I guess, a long series, 26 episodes, so... But I was figuring, why not? 650 minutes. It's longer. For $12, I'm going to check it out. So let's do the Patreon picks. And remember, Petrie, you have a Patreon pick. So shoot it for me. Because I already did Let's Scare Jessica to Death and I drew it. So you give me another one that you want. So let's do 5 out. And if I forgot somebody from last week, let me know. If you haven't been drawn out in 3 or 4 drawings, let me know and I'll bump you ahead. What do we got here? So we got Petrie, Lamprey again. Let's scare Jessica to death. So now you got 2, Petrie. You got 2. Nick Mua and the Screaming Starts. Okay, Nick Mua put and the Screaming Starts. So Dan the cameraman, gay porn. I think he wanted me to review a gay porn because it was Pride Month when he put this in there. So there we go. I'm going to draw 3 more out because I don't know if Petrie's going to get to me for those other 2. He hasn't got back to me for the other one. So David Luton not drawn out next time. Add to the front. Okay. Fear Eats the Soul. Fear Eats the Soul. Is that a Fastbinder movie? It might be. So that's 3. 4, Dan the cameraman. Director liked from Spotlight. Now, I don't remember what the fuck I meant by this when I wrote that, so I'll have to ask Dan the cameraman. He's still around. And 1 more. Dan the cameraman got a bunch, so that's weird. He got 2 in this one drawing. And last, Travis Linscomb, Violated Angels. And that's a famous Japanese director, which I've always wanted to watch his work. So, is that the one that's based partially on the Richard, what the fuck? It's not Richard Chase. Richard Speck. The Japanese version of the Richard Speck story, which is an awful goddamn serial murder or mass murder deal. But anyways, guys, we're going to get out of here. We're going to hop into, me showing... But there's nothing to hop into. We're gone. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. And as always, have a good one. Hey.